Not only did we create the first DIY metallic epoxy countertop kit, we also came up with a way to do dirty pours on countertop surfaces. This video is going to show you step by step how to recreate this look using a Leggari stone kit. All right guys, I'm gonna go over taping our edges. Primer's been down for about an hour. If you guys put a fan on it, it's gonna dry even faster. So we're looking for it to be tacky, but it's not wet. So I can touch it, it's not pulling nothing off. We're ready to go. I don't recommend this taping on tacky stuff unless you're using our primers. This primer's a fast cure. It's gonna dry under the tape. It's not gonna pull off our edges when we pull the tape later. So definitely a good product to use when you're doing our process. I'm gonna be using painter's tape. And what I'm gonna do is tape basically half on the edge and then the other half's gonna be on the top. And we're using, it's called 1.88 inch painter's tape. Easier way is just figure, 2-inch piece of tape. So I'm gonna go around, do a first layer. And then once that first layer is done, we're gonna do another strip. And I'm gonna try to keep it the same height as the first one. Now when I pull the tape, I'll pull it out and then I'll twist that, get some tension, and I can move this up and down, pull it off if I need to, and then I can kind of guide it right where I want it. Fastest way to do it. All right, so now we want to really press that edge in good, create a nice tight seal. Make sure our corners are nice and sealed up, and then we'll just pinch these in. It's going to add a little tension to the tape. Biggest key is making sure you got it pressed down nice and tight. Inside corners, you want to just make sure you get all the way into that corner, that there's no gap there. And then same thing, another row of tape. Press it down good. Increase our corners. That's kind of the process for creating that barrier, that dam to keep the resin on the counter. So that's it, guys. Simple way to tape, just how I showed you. And what this is gonna do is gonna let the resin set up, so when we pull the tape, it's not gonna ruin the design on the top. If we didn't have the tape and did our stone kit, right, it's all gonna flow and run off and it's gonna pull the design. By doing this process, we're gonna get the same exact look right when we're finished when we pull the tape. So it makes the edges look really nice, don't really have to mess with them. And then you also wanna do your sink as well, because again, we don't wanna just let the resin run off here and mess up our design on the top. So I'll finish this up and then we'll go into mixing.
All right, guys, we're gonna show you how to mix up another amazing Leggari stone kit. So we've already done a sample board. We know these colors look absolutely killer with each other. So all of our stone kits, a lot of them will have 6 colors. So we're doing 2 midnight pearls, we're doing 2 aqua greens, we're doing 2 rusts, we're doing gold Leggari effects, black Leggari effects, and then we're going to spray our famous liquid diamonds over the top as a dispersing effect and to give it more sparkle, more pop. This is one of the most beautiful kits we've ever done. So I want to show you how to mix it up. It may look right now like it's going to be hard and intimidating. One of the easiest kits ever to mix up. So the first thing we're going to do is our epoxy is 2 to 1, 2 parts A to 1 part B. And the A is thicker, so we want to get that dumped out into the container because it can take, it can take a few minutes just to empty out into the container. So I'm just going to have these draining for a few minutes in here. You can leave them upside down for as long as you want. Maybe you want to leave them upside down for about 15 minutes. Now, one thing to note is this little area in the handle, if you pour too fast, it can actually catch resin. So when you're dumping it out, just tip these things back up for like 5 to 10 seconds, let it drain out of the handle, and then just tip it back over, and you'll get most of that resin out. And what we're waiting for is we just want these streams of epoxy to turn into just slight drips. Now, when I start mixing this resin, I'm gonna mix it in this bucket, and then we're gonna separate it into 3 more buckets. These are 5-quart containers. But because we're mixing 3 different colors, I'm gonna separate the epoxy evenly in these buckets. In doing that, we're also going to mix the epoxy twice. You never wanna mix the epoxy in 1 bucket and then use it. You always wanna mix it twice. You always wanna put it into a new bucket of some sort and mix it again for a little bit. You'll also notice that when I start mixing this, I'm gonna have the drill on a very high speed. I'm gonna be inducing a lot of air into the mix. We're not concerned about air bubbles. We're not concerned about inducing air into the mix. We formulated this to release bubbles. It doesn't require any torching to set up. Full cure times in 7 days. It's pretty much rock hard within 36 to 48 hours in 70-degree temperatures. But you'll see this will be absolutely glass smooth when we're done with it. And I'm going to put a lot of air into this. So notice how it's kind of starting to drip now. There's like tiny little streams starting to drip. You can leave this upside down for a lot longer if you want, but we want to get going on this counter, so I mean, I'm happy with that. Get as much out of the container as you can, obviously. Now I have some denatured alcohol and I have some rags where I like to keep a clean station. I get a little weird about this. I want to always have a clean station because you'll drip epoxy all over the place. And although I'm going to make a mess on my mixing station, you don't want epoxy all over the floor and all over different tools. So have some denatured alcohol and a rag just to keep things clean. So I have the 2 gallons of Part A in this bucket now. I'm going to pour the hardener, the Part B, another gallon into this bucket. And essentially our clock has started. So although we're gonna take a little bit of time and we're going to stop and we're going to be explaining the process, you'll notice that we have a lot of working time, but you don't wanna forget that it is in the bucket. The longer epoxy stays in a mass and sits in the bucket, it sets up, and it's an exponential curve. It'll heat up very fast when it hits a certain point. So when I'm done mixing, I'm gonna get them right over to Tyler and he's gonna start dumping these out immediately. So now I'm adding the Part B, the hardener, and now the clock has started. I'm gonna mix this for about 1.5 minutes using an electric drill with a paddle wheel, paddle mixer. I'm gonna move the drill up and down. I'm gonna scrape the sides and the bottom with the head of the drill, just to try to get as much of that off the sides as I can. And then after about 1.5 minutes, I'm gonna pour it again evenly into these 3 mixing containers. Notice that B is much more fluid. We don't have to wait as long. All right, now I'm gonna separate this epoxy evenly between these buckets and mix in the metallics. Now I'm gonna wear a respirator because you don't want to be breathing metallics. We're in a massive warehouse, but still, I'm gonna be wearing this respirator. Mix these metallics outside if you can, or have what we actually like is to set up a shop vac really close where you can pour it in underneath that shop vac opening, and it's just sucking in the residual metallics so it's not getting airborne. So there's a couple tricks you can do there. The other thing is when I start mixing these, I'm gonna go from the lightest color to the darkest color, so I don't need to get a new drill head every single color. So I'm gonna probably start with the aqua green, move over to the rust, and then we'll finish off with midnight pearl. Now I'm going to scrape the bucket out. This is where you're gonna probably start making a mess, but we wanna get as much of the epoxy as we can. I'm gonna scrape the bottom, I'm gonna scrape the sides, get as much of this resin as we can. All right, the station, pretty clean. Now I'm gonna put the mask on. I'm gonna mix in these metallics. Not long, I'm just trying to submerge all the powder. So I'm gonna dump the powder on top, submerge the drill all the way so that it's pulling the metallics down instead of hitting the metallics with the drill and then shooting dust everywhere. I'm just gonna allow it to pull the metallics down. All right, now comes the fun, messy part. This is where you get to act like a little chef. We have 3 colors mixed up, fully mixed. It's essentially been mixed twice, which is what we want. Now I'm gonna take 2.5 quart containers, because we like to have 6 batches. You have enough volume where you really need 6 containers. So you want 6 2.5 quart containers, or you can use 2 quart containers, but we like 2.5 quart containers. And now we're gonna start mixing colors. So I'm gonna start with black on a couple of these, which is our midnight pearl. I'm gonna start with rust in a couple of these. And I'm gonna start with aqua green in a couple of them. And now we're just gonna go back and forth, and we're gonna start mix and matching the colors. I'm gonna pour the rust in the aqua green. I'm also gonna pour it in the midnight pearl. Now I'm gonna take the aqua, put it in the rust. You can kind of see a pattern here. I'm also going to put it in the one with the other two. And now what we're doing is we're just mix and matching. Now I'm gonna take the midnight pearl, I'm gonna do the same thing. And notice every batch has similar colors going in it, even though they're mixed a little bit differently. Now, if you're doing multiple Leggari stone kits, it's really simple. Just kind of remember what you did, and when you get to your next kit, while the other person is applying this first kit, immediately start mixing the second kit, because you'll remember how you mix this first kit. So now, I'm just gonna keep doing that. I'm just gonna start separating these colors now evenly in every kit. We've started a little bit different, but we want every color going throughout every kit. And Tyler will actually explain how to make sure your counters look the same. Even if you're dealing with multiple counters across the huge kitchen, the way he's gonna show you how to lay out this Leggari stone kit, it will ensure that your counters match on the entire area. You don't have to worry about, oh man, one of these batches looks way different than another batch. Don't even worry about that. He's gonna show you how to lay it out where it just doesn't matter. Now I'm getting down where I can grip these things. I'm gonna pour out a little bit at the same time. This midnight pearl just about done, so I'm gonna scrape it and empty it out on this last. You know, it's important to mention too, guys, if you've already done a Leggari stone sample kit, and now you've ordered a kit and now you're doing your actual kit, just remember, it's not gonna match your sample board perfectly, but it's gonna be dang close. You're gonna have the same shades going on in that kit. It's gonna match really well to the sample board. All right, now we'll just dump the rest of this. So a lot of times what we'll do is, like, when I set this down for Tyler, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll reference the very first color I poured into it, just so he knows, hey, these two right here have rust in the bottom. These two have the, you know, the aqua green. And I'll actually let him know that, just so he can just do those two kits first. And there you have it, guys. We made a mess, an awesome mess. Like Bob Ross says, there's just happy little accidents. This isn't really a mess. This is beautiful. So now I'm gonna get these over to Tyler. He's gonna start dumping it out. And then he's actually going to add the black and gold Leggari effects as well. And he's also going to be adding in our famous liquid diamonds, and I'm going to show you how to mix that really quick. So you want to use 91% or higher isopropyl alcohol. It's like rubbing alcohol. You can get it at Walgreens, Home Depot. We have about 24 ounces here. You want to have between 20 and 24 ounces. You want to fill this bottle up quite a ways. This is it's called a Zepp commercial sprayer. You can get them at Home Depot. All right, guys, I have the sprayer that has the 20 to 24 ounces of isopropyl alcohol. I got a piece of paper here, because sometimes what's easiest is if you take the metallics. Some metallics need more than others. So it's gonna be kind of your judgment call. If you add just a little bit of the liquid diamonds, then it might not show up as much. Maybe you want a lot of sparkle, so you're gonna add more of this. And this is how you mix it in with any color you order. Now, I'm gonna take, this is a tablespoon. We're gonna start with just a couple. A little bit goes a long way, guys. And I'm just gonna crease this. You can do it with something a little more rigid. I'm just gonna slide it in. So this liquid diamonds is just going to add a lot of pop to the counter. We love this, and a lot of people love this to add it as a dispersing effect because it just adds more sparkle. It's almost like a glitter, but it's finer, so it doesn't look cheesy. It doesn't look like a cheap glitter you bought at like Walmart that you're just flaking on that looks like pepper. It actually sits on the counter. And so just looking at this, I might shake this up and get this fully dispersed. You can even start to see it in the bottle. But I'm gonna open this up a little bit, and you wanna keep these, but notice when I spray it, see the sparkle? This is what we're going for, that sparkle on the counter. That's probably enough. We just want a little bit of sparkle, so I'm happy with 2 tablespoons on this. If you want a little bit more, you might add another tablespoon. Just remember, you have to always keep these shook up when you're spraying them because that metallic settles quickly and it just clogs the hose. So always keep these shook up when you're spraying them on the counter, and that's what Tyler's going to do. But that's how you mix in the metallics to isopropyl alcohol. Let's get these to Tyler. He'll start the countertop.
All right, guys, so just like Tim said, we want to make sure we get these out of the bucket as soon as we can. So make sure everything's ready to go. When you start mixing, once it's done, you can immediately pour on your counter. So I'm going to go over a way to map out a design. We did a project with a 212 square foot kitchen. I drew it out on paper, created some really cool looks, and then I drew that on the counter with the paint stick. So I had guides, veins to follow. So I'll show you how to do that. Black primer, I'm just gonna take a paint stick, and this will work with really any primer. We're just gonna kind of scuff up the primer a little bit. So I'm thinking we're gonna come and just kind of do something like this. That's gonna be our first vein there. So that gives me something to follow. And then I'm gonna come over here, and then we're just gonna kind of start making these all random, just kind of all over the place. So again, you don't have to map everything out, but this will give me a cool pattern to follow, right? And then I can do same thing on these counters as well. I can go around the whole top, really get a cool design that I want. And you can also, like I said, draw it on a piece of paper so you can get the exact look that you want. So we'll start. You notice I'm going really random patterns. So the design options are really endless, guys. We can do straight patterns. We can do soft S curves, right? And I always like to do some curves in with these patterns as well. Maybe not everything just so jaggedy. But all I'm doing is just going around real quick, giving me kind of a guide to follow so I don't really have to think about how I want to pour my beads out. And that's it, something like that. So now I'll just pour my beads out on these, and then once I get all those done, I have a pattern to follow. All right, so I can tell what's on the bottom. We got aqua green here, rust, and then midnight pearl because it's black. So it doesn't really matter what I start with, but I wanna make sure each bucket's going on every part of the counter. So I'm not gonna take this one bucket, pour it all out on my island. I wanna do a little here, a little over there, and even a little on the small counter here. So I'll just take my first one, we'll go from here, we'll start here, do this pattern. So all I'm doing is just following my patterns here. And notice I'm trying not to pour out big beads because it is gonna flatten out. You want to take note, you can see the color that came out first, absolutely beautiful. Well, when I get to the bottom of this, it's going to be a different color. So I want to make sure, again, we're jumping around all these counters. So we're getting the same exact veins everywhere. Always got to make sure you get behind your sink. So notice how I'm getting more of the rust color out when I get to the bottom here. And I'm always paying attention to what colors I'm getting out of the bucket. Because if I have, say I have a bunch of rust on my island, not very much anywhere else, when I get to that rust color, I'll jump to those spots that doesn't have that color. And again, that's almost solid rust color, so make sure we get a little over here. That's pretty much it for that one. So I like to just jump around to each color. So now we'll do the one that has the rust in the bottom, and we'll do a little half circle out here. I'm doing over here. So again, I'm just jumping around, not pouring too much out in one section of the counter. And then when I'm walking around, I want to tilt that back so we're not just dripping everywhere on the floor where the plastic's at, where we'll be walking. So same bucket that I was getting the green out, now we're getting some of those other colors, so just running some little fracture veins along there when I get down to the very bottom. And again, I'm just constantly moving. I don't want to stop and wait. We want to just keep pouring stuff out. We don't want this to sit in this bucket longer than it has to. Nice brown color. We'll get next to this rust. Notice how I'm trying, you can see I don't really pour a bunch right to the tape edge. We don't want to get a big pile there where it's going to build up, because it will level out to there anyway, so try not to get too much right next to the tape edge. And I'm just kind of splitting the gap when I pour out more, because this is going to level out. That's still got to level out. If I pour right next to one of the previous pours, it's just going to hit each other right away. So we want to kind of just keep filling in these gaps. All right, so we got three out, we got 3 left. So I wanna start being a little bit more precise with my pours. I don't wanna pour big fat beads in spots that doesn't need a lot, because you can see how far these are leveling out. So I'm gonna be pouring in the middle still, maybe not pouring as much, and then we just keep adding until everything's filled in. And again, we wanna take note of what color's coming out. So I don't have a lot left in the bucket. Notice I'm getting some really cool colors coming out, so I'm just kind of highlighting some of these spots since I'm not pouring as much out anyways. All right, so we're on to our last bucket. And again, we took quite a bit of time. I mean, it's a little warm, but it's not like crazy hot. But again, just make sure you guys are getting these out of the buckets. We took a lot of time explaining stuff, so just make sure everything's ready when you guys mix, and you shouldn't have any issues with this stuff setting up on you. So we're gonna finish this last one off, and I wanna make sure I'm getting the majority of the big ones, right? Like this will probably wind up filling in. A lot of these are gonna wind up filling in. So I'm just more concerned about any spots that are a lot more opened up. That's where I'm gonna hit now. And again, I don't want to dump the majority of this out just on this island. I want to make sure I'm going around every counter. And I'll show you guys how to blend some of these spots that just kind of look like a little pow was poured out. Really simple, so I'm not worried about that. We can just hit spots and stop. We don't have to necessarily run the whole pattern of that vein. All right, so notice I'm getting a lot of that rust out. I don't want to just do a bunch of piles right here with that, so I'm going to jump around until I get more of a toned down color. because once you tilt this back, you'll get different colors coming out. So just by stopping and jumping around, got me back to some of that darker brownish tones. So as you can see, guys, you got plenty material. If I stop now, the majority of this would level in. I can always use my finger, and I'll show you guys that when we're done here, but we're just gonna go around and get everything filled in. All right, guys, so we're basically out. I mean, I could get a little more out even if I wanted to do, right, some more fracture veining, but we're gonna do that with our Leggari effects. So what I can do now is I can just go around and just help level off those spots. That's all it needs. Just take your finger, blend those in, real simple. And then if there's any spots that maybe look like a puddle or a pile was poured out, right? Like right here, it just looks like a round spot. I can just run my hand through that, and that's gonna take care of that. So all I'm looking for right now is any spots that were missed, and we're leveling those off. Now to do your backsplashes can be hard to get the product up there. Don't worry about messing your design up. We're just gonna blend that in. You can run your finger out a little bit in spots. We just wanna make sure all the epoxy is up to our tape edge, because we did tape a little high, so when we pull that tape, the epoxy didn't lock it in. But I mean, these backs look really good. We got a little spot here. We'll just blend that in a little. That's all that takes. Dab that in there. And once we spray this and finish the effects, you're never gonna notice any of those spots that we touched. Like right here, it's not all the way up to the tape edge. I wanna just make sure that resin gets all the way up there. So we're ready to add our effects. So I'll grab some new gloves. All right, so I'm gonna do our black and gold Leggari effects. I'm gonna start with the gold. And you wanna make sure you shake these up. Some of the stuff will settle if they're sitting there too long, so we'll just shake this up for a second. And this stuff goes a long way, so we can always add more. We can't take it out unless, I mean, you kinda can if you blend it in there really good, but we'll just start out with less and then add more. So I'm gonna show you two different ways to create some really cool veining. So one way, we'll do it maybe right here. I'm just gonna do some drips along one of these patterns. And again, guys, a lot goes a long way. And I'm gonna take my tongue depressor or paint stick, and I'm just gonna follow that vein pattern that was already there. And we're just gonna blend this in a little bit. I'm just trying to get rid of any of the like rounded edges on it. It just creates a really cool look. So we'll do that in some spots all around the counter, and then I'll show you the other way to do it. Maybe run one. And I'm just barely squeezing this. Notice it doesn't take much. I mean, we'll get a gold vein all the way through this just from those drips. And again, I'm just blending it until it doesn't look like it was just dripped out. And maybe run one right on this edge all the way down. And I can go back and add more if I wanted to. Say I wanted more of a gold vein out here, I would just add a little bit more. So you want to make sure that you obviously don't run out. So notice how I'm jumping around. I'm not really using a lot. This stuff goes a long way. Obviously we're just doing little drips to get that gold out there, but last thing you want to do is maybe work on your island and use a lot on there, and then you wind up running out. So just kind of move around, go back and add it where you want it. I'm gonna add a little bit more out here. Trying to hit just the lighter spots. But again, being on the same, obviously the same pattern. And I don't necessarily need to hit the whole section again, just where I kind of dumped it out. And all we're doing is blending to where it doesn't look like a puddle was dripped out. All right, so there's one way to add your Leggari effects. And then I'm gonna show you another way where you can add it in more of like a really fracture, small, skinny vein. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna pour a little bit out like this. That's gonna kind of let it continuously drip. And we'll let this start first, see how much it's building up. I'll scrape some off. And then we're just gonna follow one of these patterns. And you can see the beautiful, nice skinny vein that it leaves. So again, you can add as much of this stuff as you want. And do that again. Let it start. Guys, like if you look from here, it doesn't look like there's any gold, but if you walk around that corner and look at that same spot, you can see that gold really pop. So always kind of, before you add more, maybe check both directions to make sure you can't see it in that other angle. We want to get some other spots over here as well, and then we'll do same thing with the black. All right guys, we're gonna do black now. So we're gonna do the black, just the fine, thin veins. So we're gonna pour it onto the stick here. Now, a lot of ways you guys can apply our effects. You can literally put the tip in the resin and squeeze it out as you're doing the pattern. Just know that when you do that, it's gonna add a lot more out there because this will rise to the surface and kind of spread out. So if you want skinny, tight veins like this, fracture veins, easiest way, pour it out on a stick and just let it drip off. So we're gonna run a black one right through here. So notice I'm squeezing it out halfway up, and then when I tilt it, that just slowly strips down and keeps giving me color, small amounts to add to the surface. The slower I go, the more that's going to be out there. The faster I go, the smaller the vein will be. All right, that's pretty much it, how to do the Leggari effects. And again, guys, there's endless ways to apply those effects. This is just one way to do it. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna spritz the surface with the liquid diamonds and the isopropyl alcohol, and that's gonna add that glitter, that really cool sparkle look to it. And then we'll let that evaporate for about 5 minutes, and then I'll mist the surface with denatured alcohol. All right, so I got the isopropyl and liquid diamonds here. Make sure you shake it up good, and we always wanna test spray. So I'm gonna make sure it's spritzing out. And again, when I'm spraying, I'm gonna constantly be mixing this. And we're just kind of looking for small to medium droplets everywhere. This is just gonna add a lot of sparkle to the top. If you want more of like an even effect, you would just mist the surface. You can kind of see how it's a little splotchy and stuff. That's kind of the look that we're going for, so it's kind of hit and miss where it's at. But if you want more of an even surface look, you would just mist the whole surface. And then if it gets clogged up, because the metallics, the liquid diamonds is a lot thicker, just open that tip up. Keep shaking it. Getting clogged. And obviously you guys are gonna wanna wear a mask if you're, inside a house, a kitchen, something like that. Because it does have an alcohol smell to it, obviously. All right, so there's how you do the liquid diamonds. Next thing we're gonna do in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna just mist the surface with the denatured alcohol, and that's gonna get everything on the surface to lay out glass smooth, because we've been layering so many different pores. We're trapping air in between pores, so we do have some bubbles. But again, we don't have to torch this, simply mist it with denatured alcohol, and we'll get a glass smooth finish as if you would if you had to torch it. So really cool product. We'll give it about 5 minutes and then we'll show you that. All right, so we're gonna spray the denatured alcohol. We're gonna mist the surface, and that's gonna help release any of the air bubbles that were trapped from doing this technique. When we're doing this technique, we do get some air bubbles and stuff because we are layering multiple different coats of epoxy on top of other epoxy that's trapping air into it. But typically, you don't get bubbles like you do on these Leggari stone kits. It's because we're doing it so thick and we're layering it. So again, we still don't have to torch because it's just an amazing resin. And I'm just gonna mist the surface on all the counters, and you'll see it'll just make the surface layout glass smooth. And again, guys, make sure you're wearing a mask, doing this stuff indoors. So just misting it, a fine mist. That's gonna release any air bubbles or anything that's left in the surface. So you can see 95% of those went away. I'm gonna hit it one more time, and that's gonna basically eliminate all those. So the surface is fizzing. I can see it popping a lot of those bubbles, but I'm just gonna go around, do one more hit. And you guys could see how thick the resin was from me doing the Leggari effects. It started to get kind of crusty looking. That's just because, it took us so long from showing you guys a tutorial how to do it, how to mix it. And that's kind of the benefit of our resin, the amount of working time that you get and still not having to torch the product even when it starts to set up like that. All right, guys, so last thing is to pull the tape. It's probably not ready just yet, but I'll kind of show you the process to check that. So what we do, we come over to the tape edge and I fold this down. You can see how fast it's moving down. It's just moving really, really fast. It's still really fluid. Check another spot and you'll see it's just really moving quick. So if I was to pull this right now, it's gonna pull and drag a lot of our design. We wanna keep this design because it's absolutely beautiful. So we're gonna let this set up. Now it can take anywhere from, depending on how long it took you to apply it, the temperatures, it can take anywhere from a half an hour when you're done, all the way up to 2 hours before it's time to pull. And I'll show you guys what you're looking for when you're ready to pull the tape. You just want that resin to kind of slowly move down the tape. That's the perfect time to pull it. So we'll show you guys that next when it's ready to do that. All right, so counter's ready to pull the tape. I noticed we got a chunk of debris in it. Obviously you want to pick these out, as soon as you can. This has been sitting here for about an hour, so we still can get this out. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to push it down in there, and then we're just going to let that level out, and you'll never see it again. All right, so like I was telling you guys before, the time that you're looking for. So when I pull this down, there's a lot build up on our edges because they start to taper after doing multiple counters, but See how it's just barely moving now? Nice and slow. That's kind of what we're looking for. So I can pull this now. It's not gonna mess up the design or pull crazy from the middles to the edges. So we'll just start. We'll tear the tape in the spot, and then we're just gonna pull it all off. And then I just kind of fold it up as I go. Now this is gonna get all over your hands and stuff. That's why we wear gloves. Notice how it's not pulling any of that primer off. And this is probably some of the stickiest tape you can use. When you get to your edges, see how it kind of creased in there? Try to keep it from creasing in and hitting the top. But we can pull it fast, slow, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's not gonna rip that primer off as long as your edges are nice and clean. If you guys sanded your edges and didn't wipe them good, that could create a bond breaker and you might have issues. So just make sure those edges are nice and clean. So by the time I get done pulling all this tape, the majority of it will probably be halfway or even some spots all the way coated down the edge. All right, so you can see over here where I started, it's already halfway down. And these are just bubbles from pulling the tape, and then it's layering over the edge, trapping air. So what I'm gonna do, we don't wanna assume this is all gonna cover, and this is gonna help it flow down that edge, is I'm just gonna coat this whole face. We just wanna get epoxy on the whole face. And don't worry about screwing your design up. It's still gonna flow over. So make sure everything's been kind of coated with epoxy. And you'll see how just the design here is basically all gone by the time I finish and come back here. It'll probably be all coated with the same look on the top, right on our faces. Now like spots like here, you can tell it's all the way to the bottom. There's no point in messing up the design, so I'm just gonna hit any spot that's not coated. One of the cool things about our Leggari stone kits is our veining will come down the edge at an angle. It won't be vertical like standard kits usually are. So you'll get these crazy, like look at this black one that's coming down on a vertical surface at an angle. So you'll get that from doing this process. So what I'll do is I'll start on one end. You can kind of see building some up on my finger there. And that just kind of helps slick off any of the thinner spots. Once it gets a good coat of resin on there, it'll flow over a lot easier. All right, so guys, last thing, these edges are still gonna drip, obviously, for a while. The majority of them have gone down all the way to the edge, bringing that cool design from the top all the way to the faces. And again, we didn't have to touch them. We didn't have to do anything to them. We didn't have to add color, try to blend it, nothing. So you get that natural look of stone when you're doing our Leggari stone kits without even messing with your edges. So now I'm gonna go over scraping your drips. Obviously, you know, you're gonna have to do this a couple times, and it's still too early to do it, but I'm gonna show you guys. When it's more fluid, you can use a paint stick. And you'll see what happens though. It'll start to build up on this paint stick. See how it's building up on the edge and kind of leaving a lot behind? If it's doing that, see right there? So if it's doing that, what you want to use is like a metal scraper, something that's really skinny, and we'll basically just shave that off. See how it's not building up, leaving anything behind? So when it starts to set up on you, that's kind of the process. Get something really skinny, sharp, and then you'll be able to cut that off. And as long as you hit that at the right time, you won't have to sand your edges or do anything like that that drips off. So I'll just buzz around, hit these real quick. Again, they're still gonna drip probably for another half an hour or so. So you'll wanna periodically scrape those during that time. But you can see how nice of an edge it leaves if you do that at the right time. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's kind of how you do the Leggari stone kits. And then whenever you're doing like the Leggari effects, or say you're using some spray paints or anything, you always want to top coat your counter so you lock that stuff in, and then the top, you know, obviously your surface is either urethane or our glaze coat. So we have glass smooth top coats, our glaze coat, and then we have our urethanes, which come in gloss and also matte, which is a really cool option. So we want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video and want to have easy access to viewing hundreds of other tutorial videos, simply subscribe by clicking the red button below.